and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Jackie. I'm here from Pacific Northwest Publishing with Jessica Sprick for today's webinar, Bullying Solutions and Universal and Individual Strategies. Before we get started, I have a couple quick details to review. Jessica, I think we'll get the slide advanced here in a moment for us. If you have questions during the webinar, you can send them to me, send them in the Q&A panel to Jessica and I. If you make sure just it shows to everybody, then Jessica will try to monitor and answer questions as we go, but I'll track if she misses anything. If you have technical trouble, you can use the chat window to send me a message to the host, and then we'll help you as best we can to get that untangled for you. If you're looking for the chat and Q&A buttons, if you'll notice on the screen, if you're on a PC or Windows machine, you'll find them in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. If you're a Mac user, they're little tiny icons on the lower right corner of your screen. We occasionally find with the webinars that some folks might have trouble with the audio broadcast if a whole bunch of people jump on the internet at your school all at once. We can send you instructions to call in by phone through the chat if you're having trouble. If you run into any other trouble, please bear in mind that we're recording the webinar and we will add it to the archive webinars page on our website in the next day or two. So the information will still be there and available to you. I think we're all set with that, so let's get this turned over to Jessica.
Great. Thank you so much, Jackie. Really appreciate all your help in getting this started and that you're going to be supporting us throughout the webinar. Hi, everyone. My name is Jessica Sprick, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be talking to you today about bullying solutions. I'll be talking both about general strategies and approaches that we've found may be helpful and applicable to you with bullying, and then also introducing two new resources that we've developed out of Safe and Civil Schools in Pacific Northwest Publishing. So I'm very excited to spend this hour with you today. I will do my absolute best to try and keep our time within 1 hour, but I do have a lot to share with you. So just know that if you do have to log off at any point, or if I happen to go a few minutes extra and you are needing to leave right at the end of the hour, that we will have that archive available, and we'll also have the opportunity to do some question and answer at the end of the session. So again, if that ends up going long, but it's something that you'd like to check out later, please feel free to find that in our archives. So just to get us started, overview of a couple of the goals that I have for us today. I want to start with just getting a little bit of an understanding of some of the pros and cons of current approaches that may be applied to bullying, and what some of the research has found as both potentially effective strategies when maybe they're used in combination together, but also some of the things that we know in our current approaches that may not be as effective as we would like them to be. The next thing is really trying to conceptualize how we would apply a multi-tiered approach. And so for any of you who are familiar with multi-tiered systems of support for behavior or academics or response to intervention types of procedures, you know, think of the triangle with the green at the bottom, the yellow at the middle, and the red at the top. We're really trying to advocate that bullying becomes a part of this multi-tiered approach, and that our responses and approaches to bullying fit within this idea of providing good universal prevention approaches that hopefully help the majority of our students, about 80% of our students, do the right thing most of the time, and that we intensify our intervention and prevention procedures as we start moving into students who have more intensive levels of need and more intensive behaviors. So we're going to be talking about a framework as well as some practical strategies for the universal piece. That's that Tier 1 universal prevention. And then we'll also talk a little bit about how to apply function-based approaches with small groups and or individuals at Tiers 2 and 3. So how we intensify our efforts and provide additional support for students as the need increases. And I will kind of throughout this be referencing these two new bullying prevention and intervention resources that were developed through Safe and Civil Schools and Pacific Northwest Publishing. And I am, as much as possible, going to try and make this sort of a participatory, interactive type of webinar, even though it is a webinar format. I'd love to be getting some input and involvement from you all. So one of the things that I will do at the end of the session is I'll be raffling the book, which includes universal strategies and interventions for individual students. And so I'll be raffling that at the end of the session. So if you want to kind of get your name into that raffle, basically what I will be doing is I'll be pulling the list of names of people who have entered things in as I ask you to do activities. So shortly I'm going to be asking you to do something that you're going to be typing into that chat box, and I'll be gathering your names as we do that. So just to give you a little picture, these are the two resources that we're talking about. I will be raffling this book, which is the Bullying Solutions, Universal and Individual Strategies. Now, let me give you a little bit of background, just real brief on myself. My name is Jessica Sprick, and if you're looking at the last name and you're wondering if you know Randy Sprick, he is my dad, not husband, he's my father. And I actually got my background, I really fell in love with the field of education by volunteering when I was an undergrad in a classroom for students with behavioral and emotional disabilities in special education, and just was able to work with a master teacher who showed me the incredible power of implementing positive behavioral interventions and supports, providing functional-based interventions for students, and she really just showed me the incredible power that we have to make a difference in the challenging behaviors of even the toughest students to work with. So I actually ended up becoming a special education teacher for students with emotional and behavioral disorders, and also then worked as a dean of students before I joined Safe and Civil Schools as a consultant, author, and sometimes editor for the publishing end of things. So that's just a little bit of background on myself. My entrance into the bullying arena was we do a lot of work with Bill Jensen, who's the author of the incredible Tough Kids series, and he ended up bringing to our publishing company a functional behavior assessment of bullying, which if you're not familiar with FBA procedures, it's a set of materials that allows you to dig in with a great amount of depth with students that are showing a chronic level of behavior to determine the causes. Because really what we've found with behavioral intervention is that, you know, sometimes you can throw an intervention at a student and it might be a very, very good intervention, but if it's not addressing the root cause behind the behavior, it's not going to make a difference in changing the behavior. So Bill and his students at University of Utah had developed this really wonderful process that was applying FBA procedures to bullying. And in looking at that, Randy and I advocated with Bill, and he was wonderfully accommodating, that it would really be great if we could flesh this out to be a sort of fully tiered resource where it has universal prevention suggestions and components. It has corresponding step-by-step intervention strategies. So once you have done the functional behavioral assessment and you've determined some of those causes, what are the actual interventions that you could then apply? And so that's really what we've been working on, along with some other projects, but this has been about the last 4 years of work. I do have to tell you, I absolutely love the work that we do, but trying to sit and think about bullying for 8 hours a day has been a trying test of my motivational and self-regulation strategies. So that's a bit of the background there. We just released the FBA as well as this intervention resource. Now looking into just diving into the research, one of the things that was so difficult with this set of products and also the procedures that we then developed was the research and really finding that this is such a pervasive issue that has such potential negative consequences. It really does become an emotion-laden experience to try and think about how we prevent and intervene with bullying. The research is very, very clear that there are negative effects for all students who are involved in bullying, whether it's as a student who's perpetrating bullying, whether it's as a student who's targeted or as a bystander, and in addition, just the negative effects that it can have on our school systems as a whole, and even thinking about our staff members and the level of stress and support that is needed along with this issue. Another piece of the research is that most students will be involved in one or more of these roles of a student who's bullying, a student who's targeted, or a bystander at some time during school. So it really is a quite pervasive problem that we have, and definitely something that warrants our attention because of those negative effects. So one of the things that was a little bit scary for me in delving into this is that there really is very little research that has demonstrated that there's positive replicable effects of prevention or intervention. So some studies have found that in a limited subset of cases, a certain intervention or a certain type of approach might be highly effective, but when they've tried to replicate it in other settings or situations, they haven't had as much success. And if you're familiar with Safe and Civil Schools, familiar with Pacific Northwest Publishing, our whole goal is to try and create practical resources for educators that are basically a translation of the research-based and evidence-based practices into our school systems. And so we really pride ourselves on all of our materials, us being able to point to a very, very strong evidence base and say, you know, we can sort of provide with a relative degree of certainty that this is an evidence-based practice that is going to be effective. And so it was a little bit daunting in diving into the bullying research and realizing that there isn't much that has been proven to be effective in any replicable sort of way. So that is as just sort of the backdrop for all of this. Basically what has evolved out of this is trying to understand the contextual factors that contribute to bullying and trying to apply research that we have in other areas of changing behavior. So whether it's student noncompliance or student absenteeism or any of these other types of behavioral issues, what works in changing behavior and applying those same principles and techniques to this issue of bullying. So that's basically the backdrop of what we're going to be talking about. Now, just to get us started, and again, this is going to put your name into the raffle, so if you can type into the chat window, I want to start with this question of why do we think it's so difficult to find intervention or prevention approaches that are going to be broadly successful across, you know, different students in different situations? So my first question that I'd like for you to respond to in the chat window is, what does a bully look like? And I have look in quotes because I'm not just talking physical appearance, but what types of behaviors are they exhibiting? You know, maybe who are they targeting? If you had to identify some potential profiles of bullies that you've seen in your experience, what might you describe them as? So I'm going to give you a moment to do that, and I'll just be, as these start cropping up in our chat window, I'll just read out a few of them. But think about some of the different students that you've worked with, and how would you answer this question? What does that bully look like in terms of their behavior or what they're doing, or even a sort of personality characteristic? So is it the popular student? Is it the student who's socially ostracized? And so on. So I'm going to be monitoring that chat window for the next minute or so. All right, we've got, let's see, academically and socially insecure, aggressive attitudes and dominating behaviors, disrespectful passively and outwardly, emotionally struggling, needing attention, tending to be a leader, maybe a hidden low current of self-esteem issues. A bully can look like anyone, but they have power over their target in some way. Let's see. Feeling of being unsuccessful, so attempting to get the upper hand. Child who teases pervasively another child, perceived as having power over others. Teachers really don't get the student's background. So I'm seeing from these responses that there's a really wide range, right? And so, you know, when we think of this issue of bullying, part of why this is so difficult is exactly what we're seeing here, is that there really isn't a profile. We can't say, this is what a bully looks like, and so here's the intervention that we put in place. We may have a highly popular student who is doing this as a way to sort of assert themselves in a social order. We may have a student who lacks significant social skills and doesn't know how to interact in appropriate ways. We may have another student who is bullying as a function of frustration due to academic difficulties or due to problems at home, and they don't really have an outlet to know where to put that energy. So part of the reason that this is so difficult, and part of my hypothesis why the research is so unequivocal, is that we really can't say this is what a bully looks like and here's the intervention approach that's going to work. My next next question, let me just click here, is what contributes to an individual student's bullying behavior? And actually, I kind of gave away the answer here, so I guess we'll skip the chat function on this one. And one of the pieces that we've realized that, you know, if you think about this for a moment, is there could be lots of different things contributing to an individual student's bullying behavior. And sometimes for one student, it may be one thing. For another student, it may be 10 factors that are all kind of working together. But we've really adopted from Susan Swearer and some of the other researchers that she works with. She's a phenomenal researcher and, as well as one of the real leaders in the bullying field, has brought forward this idea of looking at bullying according to a socio-ecological framework. And that's really the understanding that bullying doesn't happen in isolation as a function of just that individual student. It's happening in relationship to lots of different contextual factors that are all contributing to make this bullying situation happen. So we do have the individual, and whether there's individual characteristics that are contributing. Perhaps there's family dynamics. So, you know, there is some research that indicates that students who are bullied or bully in the family, whether it's with adults bullying the child or older siblings, or even the student bullying within that family context, that's more likely we'll see the bullying in the school context as well. We also have peer group factors and how that peer group is playing into that dynamic, school factors such as climate and safety, adult and student relationships, and lots of other pieces within that, and then also community factors or societal factors that we need to consider. So one of the things that Susan Swearer recommends is that whenever a school is struggling with a bullying problem, be it for an individual student or a group of students or even school-wide, that we are starting to think within this socio-ecological framework, that it does become sort of a problem-solving mechanism for what are the different variables that we can affect some change within this problem. So that's kind of our starting place. A couple of other things that we know about our current approaches. One is that zero tolerance has been an attempt that we've had to apply to bullying issues, and it's really been largely ineffective. And one of the things that we need to think about is that bullying is it's basically a social type of interaction. It's, if you have it, almost a social skill that students have learned over time, and that zero tolerance approaches that send the school out, the child out of the school environment really don't provide the school the opportunity to then provide the necessary teaching for the student, to give the student opportunities to practice new behaviors or expected behaviors with a great degree of feedback. And there's also just a lot of evidence that approaches like zero tolerance that sort of force us to either suspend or expel students. There are so many negative potential consequences of sending our students out of our schools in terms of what they're doing outside of school or the reinforcement that they're getting from that experience, that they're really not the most effective. The next thing that we see is that a lot of schools may, in a very genuine attempt to try and address this issue, will adopt a sort of one-size-fits-all approach. And we see this sometimes when schools put all of their effort and energy into something like bystander intervention, which some research has indicated is a very, very important component of your bullying intervention and prevention approach, but that if all of your eggs are in that basket, it still is a very reactive type of response, and it may not be as effective as if it were sort of couched within other strategies. The same thing along with bullying prevention lessons is that there are some really great curricula out there that can provide a wonderful starting place for schools to have something sort of in hand, but that also not become our one size or only approach to addressing this issue. Because also, you know, one of the things that we may need to see with this is that each school has different types of bullying situations that they need to address. So even something like a curriculum of bullying prevention lessons should just be a starting place for thinking, now we have some resources, how do we utilize those resources, how do we tailor them, how do we add on to them in this more comprehensive approach. So this piece here is just sort of a summary of our approach, is schools must design comprehensive, systematic approaches, and what I mean by systematic is data-driven, that they have regular procedures, and I'll be talking more about that later, that really are helping you to work to understand and address the factors that are contributing in each school, as well as in each particular bullying situation. A couple of things to know that are just very clear that we should be avoiding in our bullying approaches are heated emotional reactions. And I'm going to admit that this is one of the things that I look back on my time as a teacher as well as a dean and kind of give myself a little bit of a slap on the wrist, because as much as I knew about behavior growing up in the family that I grew up in with Randy as sort of a behavior guru, you know, I knew that heated emotional reactions to types of situations involving behavior really don't do anything, and if they do something, it's actually reinforcing the situation for some students. But what I found is that with bullying, I think because you have that dynamic of two students or multiple students, where you have the student who's exhibiting the aggressive behavior, but you also have the student who is under your care, who is being affected by that, negatively affected by that as the target. And so I realized in reflecting about this that bullying situations kind of made my mama bear instinct kick in, where, you know, if it was a conflict that I was having with a student, there was a defiance or a non-compliance issue, or even if it was a situation where a student was interacting inappropriately with another adult staff member, I could sort of emotionally detach from that and think logically and rationally about types of behavioral approaches that would work. But I did have a tendency to get much more emotional when it was the student bullying another student. And I do think that is just because we as educators have such care for the students that are in our settings that you know, we really feel this onus to try and address it appropriately, which can sometimes interfere with actually best practice. Another thing that we need to avoid is purely punitive approaches. And this is just recognizing that the great body of evidence that we have suggests that in changing persistent behavioral issues, if our only approach is punitive, we're highly unlikely to change that behavior. So I'm going to be talking a lot about types of approaches that go beyond just the punitive, recognizing that we do have to toe the line and have appropriate responses, punitive and corrective responses to bullying behavior, but that if we're seeking to change the behavior, we need to put a great deal of energy and attention, even more attention, to the positive and preventative approaches than just those punitive ones. The next piece here is just a caution that we avoid oversimplifying or stating the relationship between bullying and suicide or bullying and incidents of school violence. I also would hypothesize that because bullying has been associated with these types of issues, that's part of the reason we jump to heated emotional reactions, and also why our family members may jump to that, because there's been such a convergence of thinking about these as interrelated. And one of the other pieces that is very common when you look into the mental health literature as well as a lot of the bullying literature is this idea that bullying can be a trigger for some of these incidents, but they're not the cause, because typically if a student does have suicidal ideation or goes to this direction of inciting school violence, there are other confounding factors like mental health issues, like other contextual things within their family or the school environment, and so it's not just bullying, and we need to be very, very careful in our language that we don't equate the two as one causing the other. And the last thing here is just being very careful to avoid labels, and that calling a student a bully, calling a student a victim, or even calling them a target or a bully victim really puts the student in a fixed position. And this is another thing that the research is very clear on, is that students move sort of fluidly sometimes between these different roles, or between the role of bully, victim, and bystander, and that it can be detrimental to really attach that label to them, because it may sort of fix the student in that role, that we always perceive the student as a bully even if their behavior starts to change, or the student themselves internalize, I am a victim, and sort of take on the attitudes and behaviors that are going to be detrimental within that definition. All right, so moving into the strategies that we're going to strive for, really we're advocating to take on instructional and solutions-based approaches, that if we are having a problem with any type of bullying situation, whether it be individual student or a larger group like a classroom or a school-wide situation, that we're thinking from a solutions-oriented approach, not just sort of bemoaning this situation from happening, and really considering almost like a reading deficit. How would we approach that in an instructional way and a preventative way? The next piece is really utilizing data, so I will be talking about data sources later to guide the approaches that we use. And the last is applying, as I talked about before, this sort of multi-tiered model. And one of the things, Randy, my dad says is, you know, multi-tiered systems are trying the easiest, cheapest thing first and hoping that you get lucky and then moving up in intensity. He says that sort of facetiously, but that really is kind of the concept behind a multi-tiered model, is that our universal approaches are things that we do with all students that are relatively easy to implement and low cost in terms of time and effort and even money. And as we start moving up those tiers in intensity of need, that we're applying more resources, more time, more effort, but only for those situations that are resistant to the other efforts that we've applied at the lower tiers. So just to give you a quick introduction to the resources that we just released, we actually are getting the shipment in our warehouse today or tomorrow. The first one is this Bullying Solutions book, and this is what we've been working on for the last 4 years. We're very excited about it. I think it's about 700 pages of solutions, and it does include 5 overarching universal procedures that you would be doing at Tier 1 with lots of different suggestions. I'll be sharing some of those practical strategies with you today. 35 intervention strategies that are written primarily for students who engage in bullying behavior, but some of them would actually also be applicable for students that are targeted, and then 10 intervention strategies that are specifically written to support students who are targeted. So I'll give you a little bit more information about what those interventions are later on in the webinar, but this is what I'll be raffling at the end of our hour together. So hopefully you'll be able to stick with me as I end up drawing that name. Then the second resource that we have is the FBA kit, Functional Behavior Assessment Kit, which has all of the assessment materials that you would need in order to do interviews, observations, records reviews of a student who is chronically bullying in order to determine what are the causes of that, and then be able to go to the solutions book. So if you purchase the FBA kit, it does include this book as well in that cost, to be able to determine a function-based functional behavioral intervention plan. So let's head into some strategies. So all of the materials that we have within this resource are operating within the STOIC framework. And for those of you who are familiar with Safe and Civil Schools, this is going to be very familiar to you. STOIC is basically the problem-solving language. It's the framework that we use as the 5 main variables that you can use to change student behavior. So when we look at the behavioral literature across many different fields, really you can break down what you can do to create change into these 5 STOIC variables. So STOIC is an acronym for 5 variables for behavioral change. The first is structure, and that's basically the organization and orchestration of whatever environment. So how are you structuring to set students up for success? The next is teach. How are you explicitly teaching the expectations of what you want to see from students and also what you don't want to see? How are you observing behavior? This includes both the sort of supervisory practices, but also the data that you're collecting over time. How are you interacting positively with students in ways that promote appropriate behavior? And lastly, how do you correct and intervene fluently? And so really within a sort of positive behavior support framework, if we look at this, it's very important to note that the Interact Positively is much, much more than just giving students tickets or some sort of extrinsic reinforcement system. It's much broader than that into other variables that we can manipulate, as well as how do we implement corrections and interventions in ways that are actually going to help change behavior. So as we look at this and think about it in terms of bullying, let me just expand this. This is the actual chapters that we have for the 5 universal chapters in our solutions book. The first is structure the setting to prevent bullying, and I'll give you some examples of that in a moment. The next is teach all stakeholders to prevent and respond effectively to bullying situations. Observe and monitor student behavior and data. Interact positively to promote respectful behavior, and I would actually include respectful and inclusive behavior, since those are really sort of the opposite of bullying types of behavior, and correct and intervene fluently with bullying incidents. So I'm going to give you 1 or 2 examples within each of these before we start talking about the individual student intervention approaches. So just for that first one, structure the setting to prevent bullying. One of the examples or strategies that we talk about in quite a bit of depth within this section is the idea of evaluating the physical and supervisory structure of your school. And one of the pieces that comes in later in the observe section is this idea of using your data to identify hotspots. Where are your students, your staff, and your families indicating that bullying is a problem? And so let's say we did this and we identified in a secondary school that it was the stairways that are a very problematic location where lots of bullying is happening. One of the things that I can do within that location is basically go through each of these things and see where there are gaps or areas that we could make some alterations to make some improvements. So is there a problem in the layout of the physical space? Is there something that we could change? How long do students spend in that time in that area? Because if it's either too much time or even too little time, that can actually increase the amount of bullying. What are the specific behavioral expectations for the students moving within that area? Is it clearly defined, or is there a lot of chaos with students bumping into each other, or traffic jams, or things like that? What are the activities that are allowed or not allowed? Has that been explicitly defined? What are the number of supervisors in the location? And this is a very important one. I'm sure any of you who have done some work on bullying know the importance of supervision, and that if we never have supervisors in a certain area, and high school stairways are a really good example of that, where oftentimes there's a significant gap in supervision, that's definitely something for us to analyze, is how do we create a more active presence of adult supervisors who will just be sort of popping up unexpectedly within that environment, so that students never feel like I have a protected set of minutes where nobody's going to see what I'm doing. We also want to think about things like supervisor schedule. So even if we do have a supervisor assigned to that area, if they're assigned to another area that's across the school and there's no time period given for them to get from one place or another, does that leave a several-minute gap where there's no supervision? We also want to think about the ability of supervisors to scan and monitor all parts of the area. So a prime example of this is that oftentimes on elementary school playgrounds, it's a very, very big area, and we have a limited number of supervisors. So if we don't have enough supervisors to actively really address each area and be able to scan and monitor that area, do we need to limit the amount of space where students are going to be so that we can actually provide active supervision? And then the last one here is, what are the supervisor's skills in active supervision? Because even if we have supervisors in the area, if they're simply standing around and talking to someone else or looking at a cell phone and not actively supervising and interacting with students, it's not going to be effective in deterring bullying. Just going back to our stairwell example, let me give you a little bit more expanding on that. So stairways are a prime spot for bullying. They're small enclosed spaces that are difficult to supervise. As we look at this list, we can see that we really can't alter the physical space, right? We can't do anything to actually change that physical layout. So we would skip that one. But let's consider how we would adjust and clarify expectations for movement in the area as well as supervision. An example here is that we might be able to set the expectation that stairways are only used to move from one location to another. Students should never be stopping on the stairway, and we could explicitly teach the students that. We could also teach direct lessons equating stairway traffic to like traffic on an elevated highway or an on or off ramp. You never stop on that on or off ramp because there's no places to pull off. It makes stopping dangerous. It blocks the flow of traffic. We could teach our students that if you do need to stop and talk to anyone, wait until you get to a designated area that's outside of the flow of traffic, so once you're outside of the stairway. We could also do some things like if the stairs don't have a center railing, we could actually paint a line in the middle of the stairway and teach students to stay on the right-hand side, whether they're going up or down. And then we can also think about things like increasing supervision. So could we assign hallway monitors to randomly go up and down the stairways at specific times? Also saying things like, you know, make sure that you go up or down the stairway twice during each passing period, but sort of vary the times. And then also thinking about things like if bullying is happening during class periods and students are congregating in that area, making sure that periodically adults within the nearby environments are sort of peeking into the stairway to see if students are there. So this is just an example of if we identify that there's a specific problematic location, let's sort of go through this problem-solving process of what could we do to structure the setting differently and prevent misbehaviors from happening. Some other structural elements that we talk about is just the idea that your bullying prevention and intervention efforts are going to be much more effective if they're implemented within the context of broader school climate and safety efforts. If your schools are highly chaotic, if there's lots of negative relationships between peers, between teachers and students or staff members and students, those are all going to sort of set the stage for having bullying problems in your school. So we would posit that if you have major concerns about general school climate and safety issues, that really your bullying is sort of an additional thing to be considering within that, but that you would never try and tackle bullying on its own if there are these broader concerns. Another thing that could be highly beneficial is to form an anti-bullying team or task force that is meeting on a regular basis. Many schools will actually make this a part of their PBIS type team or student problem-solving team, and they'll create a subset that is really focused on bullying issues themselves. Also thinking about how to solicit your commitment from all of your staff members. And this is one piece that the research is fairly clear on, is that if there are some staff members in the environment who really don't think bullying is a problem, or they think, you know, it's just sort of boys will be boys or sticks and stones kinds of attitudes, and are willing to turn a blind eye to bullying issues, that is potentially going to increase the bullying in the setting. So really trying to make sure as a structural piece that we're setting the stage for addressing these issues, that we've got all of our staff members on board. And we do provide a range of different strategies within the solutions book for that. Another piece that is also fairly clear is that bullying tends to increase when students go to a new school environment. So from the elementary to middle school transition, or the middle school to high school. So if that's identified as a problem, that's definitely something to really be considering. You know, what are the pieces that we put in place to really try and make this an effective transition that prevents bullying right from the outset, both from things like how are we building really strong teacher and student relationships for support, but also sort of smaller communities of support with peer groups, and helping students reach across to different groups so that we're creating sort of a diverse structure for our students. And then the last piece within structure is evaluating and refining your policies. And just a little note right now, because I know you know, there are so many things that are currently happening in our schools that are fairly intense trends that we're needing to keep an eye on, and definitely seeing that there are potentially increased bullying situations that are happening, especially harassment-related types of behaviors for students of particular religions, for students of particular ethnicities, that this is where our data should also be helping inform our policies. And if we are seeing that targeting of Muslim students or targeting of LGBTQ youth or any particular population within our school, we should start making efforts to both be teaching explicit lessons to our students, our staff, and our family on the importance of avoiding those types of behaviors, on the importance of including all students and welcoming all students, but also making sure that our policies are updated to reflect that, so that there is a little bit of, if you will, sort of teeth behind this idea that we are not going to allow these types of behaviors targeting these specific individuals in our school. So with that, let's move to the next big category of STOIC, which is teaching. And the idea behind this is that we need to teach all stakeholders to prevent and intervene with bullying. And that's explicitly teaching them, providing scripts, if you will, providing practice and role play opportunities. So this is training staff, students, and families to prevent bullying. So what are we doing to actually provide some explicit training on ways to prevent it? So how to be inclusive, what does a respectful peer interaction look like? And I would even go so far as to say, like, you know, let's say when we're putting students into small groups and the teacher is assigning small groups. I actually taught a specific lesson in my class that when I assign you to a partner or a small group, this is what your face should look like, because there was such a tendency for the students that I worked with to give a little casual eye roll or a kind of behavior. And I needed to actually explicitly teach them that that's not a respectful, welcoming, inclusive type of behavior. And so this is what I want your face to look like when I assign you that. And then I would give positive and corrective feedback related to that. We also want to provide training for each of these stakeholders and how to respond in the moment. And just an example of this is that we should be providing very, very clear, explicit guidance for our staff members in if you see certain types of behaviors and kind of clarifying what does a mild type of problem look like, what is a moderate problem, and what is a really severe, maybe physically dangerous or really threatening, egregious type of act. How do you respond to each of those? Because another thing that has come out in the research is that oftentimes staff members fail to respond because they don't know how. And so this is something that if you don't have clearly defined procedures for your staff, if you haven't taught or reviewed it recently, help them think about how would you respond in the moment to certain types of behavior. And then also how to follow up after an incident. And so this could include the investigation procedures that should be initiated. That should be very, very clear and explicit, and probably even within your policies. For your families, how do they continue to follow up and advocate? Or if they find out that their student is engaging in bullying behavior, how do they follow up in making sure that their student is adopting more appropriate behaviors? An example of this, one of the examples that we include in the book, and this is how specific we tried to go with all of these suggestions and procedures, is how would you train students to respond in the moment if they're experiencing cyberbullying? So this is that in the moment response. It's the student who is being targeted. And here's what we came up with. Don't respond. Don't defend yourself. Don't try and get other students on your side. Don't retaliate. So if you get that message on social media or that text or that email, do not respond to it online, because that does have a tendency to just increase the attention to it, increase the likelihood it continues. Document each instance and then delete it. So we actually recommend that if this is like an ongoing problem that the student is having, that the school works with the student to make sure the student knows how to take a screenshot or you know, make a copy of the post and put it in a file, but then deleting it so that they're not continuing to look at it. Discontinue the use of the platform. So if you're being bullied on social media, just get off of that platform and go do something you enjoy. And this is another real clear thing for students that are targeted, is that we need to help them make efforts, and families need to help them re-engage with things that they enjoy, with people that they enjoy, because that can be a real bolster against the bullying experiences that they're having. And so that's actually a part of the intervention strategies that we built in, is this idea of sort of engagement types of activities for a student who's targeted. Lastly, don't continue to check and recheck the platform, so maybe even doing some goal setting. I will not check Facebook, or I will not check Instagram for 48 hours, just as a way to make sure that they're not hyper-focusing on it for, you know, checking every 10 minutes to see what others are adding on to it, but also making sure that students understand the importance of calmly in person asking the person to stop. And I have here use of a signal phrase this is another recommendation that we have, is that a school actually teaches students a specific phrase that they use if a student is doing something that they don't like, or if it is bullying behavior, and they actually explicitly teach students how they're expected to respond if someone says the signal phrase to them. So this piece down here, this last one, is something that I've found is oftentimes left off of target intervention types of approaches, is this idea that they need to communicate stop. And it's a very difficult skill. It's something that students may not want to do, but we have to convey to them the importance that they need to say in person to the person who's doing it, you need to stop doing that, I don't like it. Because otherwise it does create the opportunity that the other person can say, oh, we're just joking, they know, I'm just being sarcastic, that's just my personality. And we need to make sure that there is that sort of self-advocacy and initial communication. After that point, if the person continues, we've already made that effort and it moves into more intensive types of intervention, but that this really is an early stage starting place in the student responding appropriately to these types of behaviors. So moving into the O of STOIC, we've got observe and monitor student behavior and data. We hope that you're gathering data from multiple sources. This could be bullying incident reports, anonymous surveys, and I do have highly recommended here. The reason we advocate for anonymous surveys is just because a lot of research indicates that students significantly underreport bullying incidents because they're afraid no one's going to do anything, because they're afraid of retaliation. There's lots of different reasons. But that anonymous surveys can give us an opportunity to get a more collective view of what's happening behind the scenes in our schools. We might, from the surveys or even on their own, initiate some observations in particular settings, and then also focus groups and interviews. And that all of these data sources together can be analyzed to see how are we changing or altering our procedures to try and prevent as much of the misbehavior as possible. With each of these data sources, we would recommend that they're fairly specific and defined to help you collect information. And just an example of this, in the school that I worked at, our bullying incident report was basically just an anecdotal write down what happened. And it was very, very difficult for me as dean because I would get everything from a highly detailed explanation of what happened, but since it was middle school, I more often got, I'm being bullied, please help. Which becomes really difficult to determine as an administrator how serious is the issue, how long has it been going on. You know, I have 4 referrals on my desk that I need to address. I've got supervisory duties. Is this something that I need to get to right this very second, or is it something that can wait until later in the day? So we actually would even recommend that your bullying incident report, we have some samples built into the materials, but they help you collect information through some checkboxes or different types of procedures about the frequency of the bullying. So, you know, is it physical, verbal, relational, cyber? Where in the school is it occurring? What are the particular times and activities when it most often occurs? Are students being targeted because of particular characteristics? So is it maybe falling into the realm of harassment? What are the typical responses? So does the student who is targeted cry? Do they go get an adult? How do peers respond to that? How do staff members respond when they see the incident? And then also in thinking more about our anonymous surveys, what % of incidents are reported to staff? And do students feel supported when they're dealing with bullying situations? So you can see that, you know, this is much more specific than the type of information that we might be collecting from an anecdotal record that oftentimes requires a lot more investigation to really get at the heart of what's going on. For analyzing that data, we can use that to guide our school-wide efforts. So we might identify a particular hotspot through our surveys and our bullying incident reports. We might identify things like we're having a real major problem with relational bullying. Verbal and physical is not so much of a problem, but let's really target and highlight how do we address this relational bullying issue. We can think about structural alterations, specific lessons, how do we increase staff awareness and attention to those behaviors, and then the procedures that follow for staff. And then within our collected data, we also want to think about the red flag system. So how are we identifying the individual students, both students who are bullying as well as students who are targeted who may need intervention? And that'll kind of lead us, after we talk about the next 2 parts of STOIC, into our intervention approaches. So for students who bully and students who are targeted. So our next piece here, interact positively to promote respect, that's the I in STOIC. I'm actually going to come back to after I go to the C. So the C in STOIC is correct fluently any of the misbehavior. And the reason that I'm going to this is basically because I really want to highlight that with correcting fluently, there is the importance of consistency, that with bullying, it is so important that we recognize that if we see it, we have to address it, and that staff members are prepared to intervene unemotionally, but really being prepared to intervene with every single incident, and I would argue even with precursors to bullying. So an example of this is a lot of times there's a lot of very minor sorts of sarcasm and physical horseplay that happen in a school that we don't really address because it's just sort of banter, but it becomes very difficult to then identify when is that actually sort of leading to a bullying situation, or the students are joking around like this is an interaction between friends, but it's actually targeting somebody who is in that imbalance of power. And so that idea of even precursors to bullying, things like sarcasm or mild physical horseplay, that we provide some lessons for students on why that's not appropriate. I mean, imagine if you were walking down the hallway and you were seeing your administrators pushing the teachers. It would look strange, and there's a reason that that doesn't happen. But also that then adults are willing to intervene. And so part of what is required with this idea of consistency in correcting misbehaviors fluently is that we have to have a wide range of mild to severe consequences. So that if I do walk down the hallway and I see a very mild misbehavior, maybe it's something as simple as, you know, please remember to use respectful language with peers. I give a mild verbal correction, or I see somebody engage in some physical horseplay that's a little bit over the top, and I say to them, please stand with me for 30 seconds and remember to keep hands and feet to self. Those would be examples of very mild consequences that I could implement every time I see certain misbehaviors, but then that also goes to the range of more severe consequences when we see more severe misbehavior. So the reason that I did correcting fluently first is because of the importance of interacting positively, but I have some concern here. So the common behavioral principle, and this is related to Wes Becker's work on the criticism trap and lots of other behavioral research that basically has found the behavior we pay the most attention to is the behavior that some students will be most likely to exhibit. So whether they're seeking attention or whether they just realize that, you know, I get a lot of attention for exhibiting this behavior, when we start paying a lot of attention to particular misbehaviors, research has actually found that the misbehaviors increase. And so the concern that I had as I started delving into the bullying is that if the common principle is that we need to be relentless in correcting bullying behavior and doing it in mild corrective ways or using that range of appropriate consequences, but we're becoming relentless, we're paying a lot more attention to the bullying behavior, right? So one concern that I have, and part of the reason I'm hypothesizing some of our approaches may not have been effective in the past, is that we've increased this corrective part without thinking at all about the other side of the coin. How are we interacting positively and acknowledging respectful and inclusive behavior? So the other side of this coin is that we have to strive for a positive ratio of interactions. And what that means is that we're striving to pay at least 3 times more attention to students when they're interacting respectfully with their peers, and including peers, including diverse peers that they might not otherwise interact with. And we're paying more attention to that than we are just the bullying behavior. And this is something that I think we really need to start thinking about. How are we starting to promote inclusion and respect of each other by paying a lot more attention to it as adults so that we can show the students we value that behavior? A couple of examples of strategies to do this. For the whole staff, we could use our data to select the most prevalent type of bullying behavior, whether it be we've got ostracizing students, or we've got sarcasm and name calling, whatever it is, and define the positive opposite. So if we have a lot of name calling, we could define the positive opposite as using only students given names would be a positive opposite, or using respectful names with with your peers. We could train all of our supervisors to acknowledge that, and then we could take data through observations or even self-report data, having staff members tally. How often are you acknowledging that positive opposite, so that we're just shifting that level of attention to the positive rather than to the bullying behavior. Another possibility is for like an individual supervisor. We could mark a tally every time that we acknowledge respect or inclusion, and then also mark a tally for every correction or negative peer interaction. And this could be done with a whole group. It could also be done if you have an individual student who's bullying, and we're trying to increase our ratio of interaction, paying attention to when they are doing the right thing, and we're striving to maintain that 3-to-1 ratio. So with the universal, I was going to have you type in some strategies or considerations that might be helpful in your school, but since I have 7 minutes, I'm going to breeze forward into the intervention procedures. If you feel like typing that in, it'd be great for me to hear if there's anything that's sort of new or novel or you really think might be a great solution to bring into your school. I'd love to see that in the chat window. And also just remember that STOIC is a problem-solving language. There is no one-size-fits-all solution for any of this, and it does become a way to identify, here's the problem that we're having. Now let's see what we can do that has the greatest likelihood of success in helping us solve this issue. And if over time we see that it's not doing what we want it to, or we're making some growth but not enough, we can figure out what else to manipulate within those variables to make a difference. So moving into intervention procedures. What we advocate is for a student who chronically bullies, intervene like you would with reading or math deficits, so that we really are trying to take this from the sort of emotion-laden, how do we consequence the behavior out of them, or how do we implement punitive things to make them stop. We recognize that that wouldn't work in changing a reading or a math deficit, so we need to think about bullying in a similar way. How do we apply interventions in a similar way that we would with a reading or a math problem to try and help that student who chronically bullies exhibit more appropriate behavior. What we want to be doing is providing ongoing intervention and fading it over time as the student is successful, but also be relentlessly correcting the bullying behavior. So as I'm talking about the sort of positive and proactive interventions, recognize that I do see we do need to continue correcting and providing punitive consequences for each instance of bullying behavior, partially so that they know where the line is, and also to be in compliance with making sure that we are addressing bullying behaviors, and then moving into this idea of function-based intervention. Concurrently, we also want to think about how to support and intervene with a student who's targeted. So if you're not familiar with functional behavior assessment, this is the approach that we're applying. And it's basically Lohman and Borgmeier, they're two of the leaders in this idea of FBA procedures, define it as a systematic evidence-based process for assessing the relationship between a behavior and the context in which the behavior occurs. The primary goal is to guide the development of effective and positive interventions. And so what you're doing with FBA is you're recognizing that if a behavior is happening repeatedly, there's something sort of predictable usually that's triggering that specific behavior. And as a consequence of the behavior, the student is getting something out of it. And so as we think about what those functions might be for bullying, here's what we've broken down in terms of categories. The student may be, as a consequence, getting attention. So I'm getting the attention of my peers, either who are supporting the bullying, or even if it's they're giving me lots of negative attention for the bullying, but it's still attention, and I don't know how else to get it. It could be adult attention, so I'm getting a lot of attention from the adults related to the bullying, and again, maybe I lack some skills to get that adult attention in pro-social ways. It could also be just getting the attention of the student who is targeted. So I'm seeking the sense of power that I get from making this other student feel or react this way. We also have students who may bully as an escape avoidance behavior. So I bully in a particular environment because I struggle in that environment and I get kicked out when I bully, so it takes away that aversive experience. It could also be I'm escaping an uncomfortable interaction. So if I am uncomfortable, let's say as a male student interacting with female students, maybe I bully the female students so that I don't have to interact with them in other ways that are uncomfortable. We also have access to tangibles. This would be the sort of stealing the lunch money type of example, or access to particular activities. So I'm getting access to certain tables at lunchtime or other types of privileges. And the last is I could have some deficits. So maybe I have academic, social, or coping deficits. I think social skills is kind of the most obvious one, that I don't know how to interact appropriately with peers, and so I revert to negative behavior since I don't have the appropriate one. So within that, for intervening with students, we have these different categories. We could have setting event or antecedent strategies, and these are basically structural manipulations. How are we preventing that behavior from happening? So if I know that the student always has a tendency to bully during a specific time period, I could think about what I'm doing to alter that through the structure of that environment to make sure that the student doesn't have an opportunity. And so that would be the idea of increasing supervision in that environment, maybe having alternate locations where the student goes during problematic times. I also could look at replacement behavior and teaching strategies, so things like how am I teaching the student appropriate social skills, or if they do have social anxiety and so bullying becomes a way to sort of cover up that anxiety, how am I teaching them to replace that behavior? And then consequence strategies. So what are we doing to positively reinforce the student for appropriate behavior and provide corrective consequences when they're not doing the right thing? Apologies, this is so fuzzy, but this is a list of the intervention strategies that we built into this system. So you can see it has everything from addressing cyberbullying, addressing threats, students who have difficulty with anger management, that there's an intervention that's step-by-step within these procedures for how you would intervene with that student. If the student has academic deficits and this becomes a way to sort of cover up for those, we have an intervention that's assessing academic needs. So lots of different interventions here. And then we also have the 10 strategies to help students who are targeted. So we have an initial one, does the student actually need support? And then everything from cognitive behavior therapy for anxiety issues, empowerment intervention, positive self-talk training, and some specific ones on how to recognize and report, as well as how to respond to bullying situations. Just to show you these arrows here, we did actually require for any intervention plan that consistent corrective consequences, making sure that every instance is addressed, as well as increasing positive ratios of interaction are required components of any intervention plan that you're doing. And all of the rest of these strategies can kind of be built on top of that base of positive support. Just to round us out here, a couple of tools and strategies. Visit www.stopbullying.gov if you haven't had an opportunity to. They have some wonderful resources and just really condensed information, but a lot of really good information about how to start addressing these issues in your schools. And then if you're interested in the two resources that we have, the Functional Behavior Assessment and or the Solutions book, the website is here, Pacific NW Publish. The FBA kit, which includes both the FBA materials as well as the Solutions book, is $295. It's $95 if you're just getting the Solutions book. And we will be sending up a follow-up email in the next day or two that I believe includes the archive of the webinar, as well as a 10% coupon for anything in our PNW catalog. So if you're interested in purchasing any of that, wait for that coupon, and it should be there in the next day or two. For our raffle and our final conclusion, if you have any questions, can you go ahead and type them in the Q&A, and I'll do that after our raffle. If you're interested in any training support or any other information, feel free to call Safe and Civil. The number is here. And for our raffle, I have Bill Cassidy, I believe, is our winner for today. So Bill, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to ask that you call Pacific Northwest Publishing and ask for Jackie. You can do that anytime and just let them know that you're Bill Cassidy. I'll make sure they have your name and that we will go ahead and send you a copy of that book. If you're wanting to give us a call, the number is 541-345-14 1442, and we'll go ahead and get that in the mail for you as soon as we've got it in hand. So thank you so much for taking the time today. I really appreciate all of you being here in your busy days to try and think about these issues. I hope that some of the strategies are useful to you. And let me go ahead and go to the Q&A here. So let's see. Are there interventions for a teacher that is being bullied by a student? Great question, and that is actually not something that we included within the procedures. We did address sort of staff member to staff member interactions and whether or not that's modeling to students appropriate modes of interaction, but we don't currently have interventions for a teacher being bullied by a student. I would love to dig more into that, and then hopefully when we do a revision, we can include that in there. So Leslie, thank you for your question, and I'll actually try and see if I can find some information, and maybe next time I do a webinar, we'll see if we can include that. Allison wrote, can these interventions work if schools struggle with universal tier implementation? Great question. It will be more difficult if tiered implementation is a struggle in general. Trying to address it with just bullying procedures is going to be tough because bullying is such a tough issue to tackle, and it can be difficult to see results immediately. But you know, I do think that the importance of coming back to if there's lots of bullying happening in your school, it really isn't isolated to a student or two. It does indicate a systems level issue, and so really what can start happening is we end up totally bogging down our systems by trying to address it student by student, and so it does really go to the importance of that tier 1, and that might be where if you're struggling with universal tiered implementation. You know, the resources that we have hopefully provide some really clear, explicit guidance. I also would be more than happy to talk with you about, you know, ways that we've found to increase the efficacy of tiered implementation. Let's see. Adam Collins, is there research on which function of behavior is most common for students who bully? That's a great question, Adam, and I actually am not completely sure what the research says, but I'm going to go back to the functions for just a second. You know, I think that a lot of research does indicate that we know that attention is a major factor for a lot of students, and especially that peer attention piece. But just that idea overall that attention is a major factor for a lot of kids, either that I don't know how to gain it in appropriate ways, or it does really become a power mechanism for sort of asserting myself within a social order. It becomes a way of gaining some sense of popularity for a lot of students. So that's definitely one function to pay a lot of attention to. I also think that the social skills deficit and coping skills deficit are a big one. And for our students who are targeted, thinking a lot about the students who are withdrawn, the students who deal with anxiety issues or depression issues are much more likely to have experiences with bullying. And so those also kind of fit within the social and coping skills realm of how might we provide some supportive interventions to help build some capacity there. And if there are mental health needs, how are we making sure that we're linking students with appropriate supports either in the community or through our school systems? Let's see here. Let me see if I've got any other questions. At one of the buildings in my districts, the students have a one-liner that's used, I didn't like when you, it would be appreciated if you wouldn't do that or say that. That's great. Leslie, thank you for that comment. That's just an example of what I was talking about the sort of signal phrase notion, that students are sort of given a statement to use so that they're prepared with how to respond, but also so that anyone who's hearing that response knows what their expected behavior is, which is to stop the behavior. Wonderful. I don't think I saw any other questions, but I'll go ahead and go back through these, and if there's anything that I didn't address, I'll try and make sure that I follow up with that in our email. And if you have any additional questions for me, my email is jessica@PacificNW, like Northwest, PacificNWpublish.com. I would love to hear from you. If you are interested in learning more about this or just having a discussion, please feel free to get in touch. And again, I really appreciate all of your time today. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Jessica, and thanks everybody who joined us today. If you found this information valuable and you're looking to review it or to share it with other folks in your school, you'll be able to access the recording in a day or two on our Pacific Northwest Publishing website and visiting the archived webinars page. We'll send a link out via email along with that coupon for the 10% off the Pacific Northwest materials. You can also find out more about a couple of upcoming webinars we have covering topics including the new Tough Kid Tier 2 Interventions and Superhero Social Skills program with Bill Jensen, and instructional support via explicit instruction with Anita Archer coming up. And you can look up those on our website too. We appreciate you all coming out, and thanks for taking the time to view this webinar.
Thank you, everyone.